today. This is June the 15th, 2024, and we are at the MWSA, Military Writers Society of America, education Zoom meeting that is being recorded. And our guest speaker today is Greg Elliot, who may or may not tell you the reasoning behind his names, his various names, but he is going to talk about writing for the screens, big and small, a primer on writing for television and the movies, part 3, your Bible. And Greg talked about that last time, and he said he would tell us more about the Bible in this session, establishing your world, your tone and theme, and creating the well from which your characters emerge. Okay, Greg, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's by the way, Bibles were invented for television, but there are important pieces of the Bible that also can be used for you screenwriters as well. So, and we'll talk a little bit about those as they go by. First of all, what is a Bible? In television parlance, it's the document that holds all the pieces of your series, as was outlined in the title. Your world, your tone, your theme, your characters, sample episode breakdowns, and where you plan to go with your series in seasons 1, 2, 3, and where your series is going overall. It's usually about a 10-page document, and we'll look at samples of Bibles from actual shows that really got on the air. And we'll go over each of those pieces of what should be in your Bible one by one. First, there are 3 kinds of Bibles. There's a pitch Bible, which is the most common. It's the one we're gonna talk about the most today, and it is what it sounds like. It's a pitch document that does everything that we just talked about. There's also a pitch deck, which is a pitch Bible with pictures, and there's a show Bible. A show Bible is pitch Bibles and pitch decks are usually about 10 pages long. Pitch decks can be a little longer because they have pictures that take up room. But a show Bible is once your series have been greenlit, sometimes after your pilot even has been shot, when you have a writing staff and you want them to know everything you know about how the series should go, you create a show Bible. And where a pitch Bible is 10 pages long, a show Bible can be 50 to 80 pages long. We're going to look at a show Bible. We're going to glance through a show Bible that is almost 80 pages long. Okay, so those are the 3 kinds. Here's to describe a little more about each of them. The pitch Bible is what it sounds like. It's a pitch document. It's going to pitch your series on paper. By the way, at the end, near the end of this session, we will talk about actual real pitching, when you are standing in front of a studio exec who's usually sitting behind a big desk, and you are verbally pitching your story. There's a great deal of similarity, as you'll learn today, between a pitch Bible and an actual verbal pitch. They cover a lot of the same ground, and we'll briefly spend a little time with verbal pitches at the end of all of this. But that's the work that your pitch Bible is doing. A pitch deck, I pretty much told you already, is a pitch Bible with graphics. A picture being worth 1,000 words, often pitch decks are shorter. There's less verbiage in the deck because the pictures are doing some of the work. And the show Bible, as I said, is usually the document for your writers and your staff. The Voyager Bible, when I wrote for Voyager, the Voyager Bible is about 50 pages long. It spent pages and pages on how the engine works, what fuels the engine, where you need to get fuel, things that can go wrong. Who knew the elevators on Voyagers are both horizontal and vertical? They can go anywhere in the ship. And we learn that in the Bible. Whether or not anybody watching the show gets that or not, we learn those kind of things in the Bible. Other Bibles maybe concentrate slightly less on the technical stuff, but that's the idea. You want all of your writers on the same page about what your vision is for your series. And again, that'll be a little more obvious when we actually look at an example. You'll see what the writers, what the creators of the show are putting into that document for their writers. Okay. It used to be the Bibles began with a log line, and I think we chatted about log lines in an earlier session, but if you don't remember, a log line is usually one sentence long that tells you enough about the series to make the reader want to know more. You're not describing much at all. You're describing enough to make the writer want to know more. And we'll look at a couple of examples of Bibles that begin with a log line or a version of a log line. So you start there. Bibles are like fashion. It's like men's ties. It's like women's skirt lengths. Pitch decks came into being fairly early in my writing career, and they were a really hot item for a while, and then they cooled off and you didn't see them at all. And now in the last few years, we've been seeing them again. The same thing with starting your Bible with a log line. That was de rigueur when I was writing television, and we drifted away from that, and now we seem to be drifting back. So I'm going to tell you all of the basics of what goes into a Bible. But when we look at these examples, you will see that each of the writers of their own particular pitch Bible has chosen their own way to put together the information I'm telling you. I'm going to tell you the order that I would put mine in, but you'll see that other people it's all the same information, but it can be packaged in different ways. Okay. If you don't start your Bible with a log line, you're likely going to begin with your world. Where are we? Is this present day? Is this the distant past? Is this the future? Is this the world as it really exists, or is this a fantasy version with dragons? What is the world that your series inhabits? Next is tone. This is a dark story with werewolves, but it has a good deal of humor. That would be the tone for the movie American Werewolf in London. This is a lighthearted tale of 4 female friends who live on Wisteria Lane, but it also has an undercurrent of murder. That would be the tone of Desperate Housewives, a television show. You want to describe your tone in your Bible, but also, as we'll see in the examples, you want your Bible to carry that tone on its own. The humor or the horror or whatever it is that is the tone should be embedded into your Bible. Okay. Finally, the opening of your Bible, this opening couple of pages is probably going to touch on theme. One of my mentors long ago said, if you ask a writer, what's your story about? They usually tell you plot. Well, it's about a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and there's this kid that doesn't know that he's a prodigy of a Jedi, and he saves the galaxy. If you say to that same writer, what's your story really about? They're likely to talk about family, working as hard as you can under almost impossible circumstances. They're going to talk about theme. And again, in the examples we see, we're going to see where these writers in their Bibles lay out plot and or lay out theme. Here's the tricky thing about theme. Theme doesn't usually show itself right away. I have written probably somewhere around a dozen pilots. If we had time, I would tell you all the exciting conversations I had at CBS, NBC, and Disney Family back when that was what the channel was called, of shows of mine that almost got on the air. Back to my point, when I was working on those pilots, when I was creating them and working them and rewriting them, theme would like sneak up on me. And when I realized what it was, I would think, I'll put that in here and nobody would know that I didn't know that when I started. And after that happens like 4 or 5 times, you realize on some level, I knew that all along. It just took its time revealing itself. So when you write your Bible, even though theme is often near the beginning, you don't necessarily want to start with that. You might want to end with that when you know what you're really doing, when you know what your heart of hearts really wants to say. That's your theme. And you can go back and stick it in, even if it's near the beginning. You can go back and stick it in later. Theme is a little tricky, but it's important because what's your story really about is the way you can describe franchise, which is a common word in Hollywood, where you can, which is what studio execs want to know, right? What's your story really about? We'll talk more about that in a slightly different way in a minute or two as well. Okay, next up is likely to be your characters. And when you describe your characters, there are a couple of different parts that you want to make sure you cover. We've talked about some of this in previous chats, but we haven't talked about it in relation to your Bible. So some of this is similar to what we've talked about already, but in a slightly different context. The first thing you want to do is what for each character, what are their traits? George is soft-spoken, affable, too likely to trust. Mary is self-contained, suspicious of everyone, and always the first to assume the worst. You want these to be simple. You want them to be short. You want them to be very, very, again, in very few words, you give us a sense of who that character is. And there's a couple of reasons to do that economically. One is you can literally lift that out of your Bible and drop it right into your script when you introduce Mary. Mary walks in. She's self-contained, suspicious of everyone, and always assumes the worst. Boom, you move on with the scene, but we have a sense when we meet her of what Mary is like. That's in your Bible. It may also be in your script. The other thing, probably the larger section of your chunk of your Bible that is each character, is the characters' backstories. Who has known who since kindergarten? Who works with whom? Who's related to whom? Who has hated whom since the high school prom? You get the idea. We're going to talk about Warner Brothers Studio and what they ask of their writers who come to them. And Warner Brothers' word for this part is entanglements. That's a word I love. How are your characters' lives entangled with each other? Because those kind of entanglements suggest a long-running relationship that is going to continue through your series, and that's going to be good. As far as trouble is good in television and in the movies, trouble is good. So we'll talk more about that in a minute too. So these are the two parts that you're laying out. And here's the thing about how this works. You want to spend time with this. You want to get to know these people. You want, and again, I know I've said this before, but you want the characters on your page to be as close to living, breathing, real people as you possibly can get. The more those characters are people we recognize, people we know, people we would rather not meet again, the more we recognize those as real people in your story, the more we're going to be absorbed into your story. And the place for that wellspring of who these people are is your Bible. Now, your pitch Bible is going to be 10 pages long, and you may write 5 of those pages on one single character. And you're going to take, for your pitch Bible, you're going to take the most important parts of that and you're going to stick them in the pitch Bible. But you're going to keep all of it. Because when your show is going on the air and when you have your staff, you're going to give them that 50-page version that has everything you know, everything you've ever thought, everything you've ever dreamed about for these characters, which may be more than you need in your pitch Bible, which is why we never throw any of this stuff away. You work and work and work until you know these characters. And if it's too much for your pitch Bible, and it often is, you cherry pick and you keep the rest because you're going to need it later. Okay. A quick note. Again, most of you probably know I taught television writing at UCLA for 15 years. I was part of the group that put together, I was writing and trying to sell pilots. and some of my other fellow UCLA, by the way, UCLA took professional writers and taught us how to be teachers in their writing program, which I thought was a great way to do this. So there were other writer teachers with me who had been down this same path, and we got together and we decided how we should teach pilot writing. And part of that was creating your Bible, which what we're talking about today. But we realized UCLA, not me, UCLA realized fairly quickly, when I say fairly quickly, within 2 or 3 years of offering this, that it was way too much for one 10-week course. And they divided it into 2. And the reason I tell you all that is my students, when they realized they weren't going to finish their script, often abandoned the Bible. And here's why I implored them not to do this. Your Bible teaches you how to write your script, who these people really are, what's really important to them, maybe more about that theme thing that we talked about. Here's what I said about my theme in my Bible. Where is that theme in my script? Your one hand washes the other. As you write the script, there are going to be things that occur to you that you want to put in your Bible. As you create these characters in your Bible, there are things, not all of it, of course, not all of it that's in your Bible is going to get into your script, but there are things that you want back into the script because you need to know that that person doesn't trust anybody. Where do you show us that? So you get the idea. One hand washes the other. When you are working on this, I encourage you to work on your Bible and your script together, whether you're writing a screenplay or whether you're writing a television pilot. Again, especially those characters, those walks you take when you think about, or when you're driving somewhere, or when you're in the shower and it occurs to you something new about your character, go write it down and stick it in your Bible. Okay. Some Bibles choose to give details about the plot of the pilot, and some choose not to because you're assuming that you're handing over your Bible and your pilot script at the same time. This was always tricky for me because some people, even when you do that, some people read the script first and then read the Bible. Some people read the Bible first and then read the script. So how much do you tell them about what's in the script? You will see, again, from the examples that we use, different writers have different amounts of the balance of that, of how much of your pilot is also explained in your Bible, probably at least the plot, the bare bones of the plot. And we're going to talk about more about those other parts and how much of each of those you stick in. Okay, so you've laid out your world, your tone, your theme, your characters, maybe a bit of your plot. What is left? Now, here's the thing. This also has shifted a bit back and forth. How much studios want to know how in different ways. There's a whole little tiny subplot I will mention to you. In addition to the Bibles, studios started asking for a one sheet. And one sheet is actually 2 pieces of paper, because you could write, back when we used real paper, you could have it on both sides, right? Which is really two pages. But a one sheet is your Bible, your 10-page Bible condensed into 2 pages. And here's what the studios were doing when they started asking for those was, give us the log line. Okay, it's sci-fi. Okay, this studio doesn't do sci-fi, and they don't even need any more. But if they do sci-fi, they say, okay, give us the one sheet. And if they like the one sheet, they say, okay, give us the Bible. And if they like the Bible, they say, okay, give us a script. We've evolved. It used to be, God, I sound old when I say, back in my day, you walked in to a studio and they were called leave behinds. The copy of your script and a copy of your Bible, you literally left behind. They were called leave behinds. Unless they said, thank you very much, don't bother leaving anything, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And since almost everything is emails today and Zoom meetings, things have changed. But I continued to write pilots and try to get them sold, even when I was teaching. And even relatively recently, I was sending work out. They were still asking for most studios were still asking for the next parts I'm going to mention. And I'll tell you what they are, and we'll talk a bit about them as well. Okay, a short explanation. When I say short, I mean short. You think of a log line as being one sentence that makes you want to know more. These paragraphs that we're talking about now are 2 or 3 sentences often that make you want to know more about. The first one is a short explanation about where your first season is going. And let's take a real simple example. In the pilot, John meets Mary and they fall in love. Over the course of the first season, they fight, they get together, they fight, they get together. At the end of the season, they get married. In season 2, they have a child, and the child, rather than bringing them closer together, drives them farther apart. And by the end of season 2, John is having an affair and Mary is looking for a divorce. In season 3, through everything, they manage to realize what's really important to them, and they come back together. And by the end of season 3, which is also the end of the series, they live happily ever after. You don't need much. You give an arc, a sense in these paragraphs of season 1, season 2, season 3. And the question that they were still asking is, where is your series going? Overall, where is your series going? And that fourth question is almost always about theme. It's almost always about what your series is really about. If you remind yourself what your series is really about, that's that last paragraph of these 4 paragraphs that sometimes take up altogether, only take up half a page. Sometimes, as you will see, take up longer. But you're coming back to what is the series really about? And here's why you do this second half of your Bible. Here's why you're doing all of it. As I say in class over and over and over and over, you are not selling your pilot. You are selling the promise of a series. And the studios want to know, pilots, last time I checked, the average, and it's a wide average, I know, but the average pilot was costing between $11 and $30 million. Studios can be careless with their money and often are, but nobody's plunking down $11 to $30 million without having a sense that there is a series here that they want to make. So your Bible, this pitch document is saying, I've got this all worked out. Here's the first season. Here's the second season. Here's the third season. I know where this is going. Make my pilot, and we'll make money together. This second half is assuring the studio that you've got, whether you've got it or not. The one thing you want to avoid, and actually one of the pilots we're going to look like does exactly what I'm telling you not to do. But the one thing you want to avoid is saying, maybe it'll go this way, maybe it'll go that way. That's not what the studio wants to hear. Even if you are still thinking that. John and Mary might not get back together at the end. You don't say that. You say, I've got this. I know what this is. I know where this is going, blah, 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 blah. You put up a good front. Okay. Okay. And there is one more part. Bibles often ask you for studios often ask you in your Bible for a description of what happens in episode 2, episode 3, episode 4. We know what happens in the pilot. What happens I'm going to say it again. Back in my day, when there wasn't streaming and you couldn't wait 5 seconds to see the next episode, the most common number of episodes that a series did was 26, because 26 times 2 is a year, right? So you start with 13. You lay out in the first half of your season, again, in short little pithy paragraphs that don't describe too much, but make the studio exec, make the reader want to know more. And again, we'll see examples of that. Sometimes they do a lot more, depending on the series. Okay. Again, because you're not selling a pilot, you're selling the promise of the series. All right. Now, we're going to look at some pitch Bibles from real shows that were really submitted to really try to get these things sold. And you are going to see none of them do things exactly like I told you to do them. But if you notice, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on each one, we're going to kind of breeze through them and notice how they put together their Bibles. But what you'll notice is they all do the pieces that we just talked about. Characters might be a huge part, and season 2 might be a very small part. they will differ in that. But let's take a look at these examples. First up is the Bible for Fargo for the original season. But if you know Fargo, you know that every season is pretty much like a new series. Every season could have its own Bible, probably does have its own Bible. I just a quick personal note. I am a big Coen Brothers fan. Since if you know their movies, Fargo among others, if you have not seen Blood Simple, the first movie, I don't think it was their first movie, but the first movie that broke into the big time. It's in black and white. It is astonishing because it's different in the Coen Brothers way, that field that the Coen Brothers were plowing that nobody else is. I swear the Coen Brothers, one of the things that the Coen Brothers seem to be saying to all of us in their movies is people are stupid and they do stupid things. I'm not, that's maybe a little unkind, but I say all that to say I was blown away by Fargo as I was by most of the movies, and I did not expect anybody could make that into a decent TV show, and I was wrong. It probably helps that Mr. Hawley, the writer and creator of this, A, worked with the Coen Brothers, and B, has a few other shows under his belt. So he's not a newcomer to this. And he's working with the creators. Okay, so how does he start? And that thing we talked about the tone, you want the tone that you're showing, you want your Bible to be written sort of in the same tone. Notice, I'll point out a couple of examples. Notice how Mr. Hawley does that in this Bible. First, he starts with a definition of Fargo, a city in eastern North Dakota, founded. Okay, and look at the second definition: a unique brand of true crime story, part tragedy, part farce, in which simple, good-hearted people come face to face with something monstrous. This is his logline, cleverly disguised as the definition of Fargo, which sort of implies his somewhat impish approach to the whole thing. It is monstrous. It is horrible. If you know the series, you know what his characters get up to. But here it is, a logline snuck in as something else. Okay. This is the story of a criminal. Now, you might say, because he's going to mention his Malvo, his criminal, and his insurance salesman, and the female deputy, each of these is it's almost its own little mini logline about his major characters, and a little about the story that he's telling with each of them. But that goes on for quite a while. Then he simply lists the characters. Lester Nygaard is that insurance salesman. Molly Sorvenson is that police detective. Gus Grimley is that state patrolman. And he doesn't say anything more about them here because he's already said it here, and he's going to say more later. So it's, again, his own particular style of laying out this information. Here is his tribute to, I guess, what you would call a pitch deck, which you're going to see when you actually have. He says, but then the next thing he does is say, okay, the show is a triangle. Season 1 is a triangle in which we track a crime spree from point 1, point 2 to point 3, and then back. Okay. And then he says, well, maybe it's a circle. And again, that sort of impish, he can get away with this because he's not new to the table. Everybody knows his work and knows who he is and blah, blah, blah. So he's kind of playing with us in a way that is interesting. Then he talks about the arcs. And here he kind of, as he's talking more about Malvo, his villain, he's also working into it plot. But he spends a page or more on Malvo, and then he goes on to Lester. And again, that insurance salesman who ends up murdering his wife and trying to get away with it, and things get worse and worse and worse for him. We got a page on Lester or more. Molly gets her own page. Gus gets his own page, even though these are smaller characters in the series. But we're getting plot as well. And then this term, we want, by the way, I'm going to send all of these to Jim. If you want to read these at your leisure and see the whole thing and how it is and what the heck is a Mike Giganta, that'll all, we're not going to take the time to do that, but you're welcome to do that on your own. All right. So that's the Bible for Fargo. Moving on. Let's take a look at the Bible for True Detective. Again, a writer who has been around the block and is absolutely sure of his ability to do this. I really shouldn't talk and try to pull up documents at the same time. It doesn't work. Anyway, let's let me stop talking and pull this up. Okay, so this is True Detective, and I'll make that a little bigger. You can read it a little easier. Okay. An investigation by Nick Pizzolatto. Mr. Pizzolatto is a lot of things. One of them is he's very sure of himself as a writer, which is, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's him. Notice how he starts. True Detective is an hour-long serial narrative which functions as a layered literary mystery novel for television. That doesn't tell us anything about the plot or much else. It tells us about the style with which he's choosing to write. The 8 episodes are about an epic 20-year hunt for a killer. Okay, notice this. The 8 episodes are about a 20-year hunt for a killer. That's plot. But the true subject of the story is its 2 lead detectives, their families, the changes and contradictions in their lives and characters over these 2 decades. That's theme. He is laying out plot and theme in one paragraph right at the top. It reinvents the procedural, blah, blah, blah. The first season of 8 episodes details a 12-year partnership, and then he starts to go into the structure, 2 time frames. Back when they were younger, if you know the show, back when they were younger and they were detectives and they were on the trail of this serial killer, and years, decades later, when they're both retired, they both become completely different people. One of the questions he suggests in the Bible is how did these detectives turn into these people? What happened? And those mysteries, when we get there. So he talks about the 2 time frames. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Now notice what he says. Though complex, this will be easy to follow. And he underlines easy. Don't worry, studio exec, if I just confused you. This is going to be easy to follow. He's telling us that right in the middle of, again, some of the style of the show is shown right here in the style of the Bible itself. Now, suspense, again, he talks about the primary layer is the hunt for the killer. The secondary layer is what happened to these 2 detectives? Why were they brought back? Why after this 20-year hiatus are they diving into all this stuff again? And the writer and the show are not in a hurry to explain that. You have to get through a bit of that. And then a 3rd layer of suspense is blah, blah, blah. So he's laying out the suspense. He's laying out the humanism. What drives these characters? What are their entanglements? Then we get to the characters. We got a good solid page on Marty, a good solid page on Rust. These are the 2 lead detectives, and he doesn't even bother to lay out any of his other characters. And then he lays out the episodes. And again, he calls this a closed end. At the end of we'll see at the end of the pilot, what he says is, this is closed-ended. End of story. 8 episodes. This story is over. Now, there's potential for season 2 and season 3 if you want, but this story is over in 8 episodes. So he lays out all 8. He takes the rest of his pilot, his Bible, to lay out pretty much a page at a time. Episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, boom, until the end. And then he says in half a page, season 2 and franchise potential. This is where this story is over. But this is where the series could go. Back to that. You're not buying the pilot. You're not even buying these 8 episodes. You're buying the potential to do it all again with different detectives in a different situation. That's one of the things that Fargo and True Detective have in common. Season 2 has almost nothing to do. In Fargo, a couple of holdover characters, but in True Detective, brand new detectives, a brand new situation, brand new everything. And just between you and me, season 1 of True Detective was brilliant. Season 2 is a waste of your time. What happened? I'm not sure, but okay. Moving right along. We're going to take a look at a pitch Bible. One of these documents that is here, I'm doing it again. It's so hard to talk and push buttons. But this is the pitch Bible with graphics of Stranger Things. So I can stop talking for 1 minute and pull that up. Now, Stranger Things was a couple of things to notice. Stranger Things was originally called Montauk. And one of the things I find interesting about this pitch Bible is they made it look like a well-worn old comic book. Notice it's issue 1. There's even a price over here. And the page, if you look, there's a crease down here. There are creases on the page here. This is all created on a computer. This is not, and by the way, Montauk was the original title for Stranger Things, which is why it's called Montauk here. But notice the first thing we get is this graphic. Now, this, as we'll learn later in this document, this is a real radar tower or whatever that is, satellite tower, from the real Montauk, which is a real military base where supposedly some strange things were happening. But that's in the background. What do we open with? We open with a child's bicycle on its side. And here we're talking tone. Almost all of the pictures that these are 2 brothers that created this show. And as they say, they are big Stephen King and Steven Spielberg aficionados. Almost all of the graphics are to support this tone. Notice all it says is an epic tale of sci-fi horror. Now, that gives you a ballpark. It's sci-fi and it's horror. Doesn't tell you anything else. We're spending our first page here on tone. Introduction. Montauk is an 8-hour sci-fi horror epic. Just coincidentally, I think, just like True Detective, they said this is a closed-end story. We'll see. And they mentioned, look, they start with mentioning the fear and wonder as Elliot approaches in E.T., the helpless dread Sheriff Chief Brody in Jaws, the crackling television in Poltergeist, the horror of a cackling clown in It, the friendship and adventure of Stand By Me. And Stand By Me is the one they leave on because they're going to start with 4 boys about the same age as the characters in Stand By Me, with about the same relationship it is in Stand By Me. And that's not coincidental. That's not by accident. They will tell you that they've done that on purpose. We're rooted in character. Montauk is a love letter to the golden age of Steven Spielberg and Stephen King. We're all still talking about tone here. We haven't, what's this show about? We don't know, because again, they are confidently rolling in with what they think is most important to begin with. And again, they move on to still from E.T. And then they tell you, of course, E.T., directed by Steven Spielberg, 1982. There are no words here. This is more tone. Then they start to talk about the Montauk Project conspiracy, and this place Montauk is supposed to be where all these aliens and all this other crazy stuff is going on, and blah, 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 blah. They still time travel, telepathy, alternate dimensions, mutant monsters, you name it, someone claims it happened at this base. They still haven't told us what this story is about. They are taking their sweet time. There it is. That is the real radar tower, or whatever that thing is, satellite tower from Montauk, Long Island. Then they get into the story. And Will is the young boy of the four who disappears in the pilot. And they talk about, if people can disappear, can an entire town? And notice these are questions. They're being a little coy, which we are all advised not to do in documents like this, but they're doing it and they're getting away with it. Okay. So another graphic just for tone from Close Encounters. Then they talk about the structure. There will be no loose ends. They're going to wrap up their story, but they say this story could continue. And in fact, it did. It's now in their 5th season. So we're done after 8, but we could come back for, okay. So you get the idea. More graphics. Tone and style. As if there wasn't already enough tone. This is mostly about style because we've already established a tone. The pacing will be fast. They tell us, boom, right up front. And they continue to talk about that. More graphics. They talk about the horror. More graphics. Then they get around to their characters and they break them into groups. The kids, these 4 kids. And notice the graphic that comes after them. From Stand By Me. Then the outsider, who's the kid, who's not one of those 4, but who hooks up with them, is the number 11, who has special powers. For graphics. Then they separate out the teenage characters, and then they separate out the adult characters, and their graphic for the adult characters is, again, we all know that one. We all know where that one is, and they're going to tell you if you don't. Okay. All right. Then they talk about the franchise potential. We're done in 8, but these are the things that could go on, and we're up. So again, a sense of time and place and era, etc. That's what the graphics can do for you. Again, not many more words in that Bible, just a lot more pictures. All right, we're going to look at one more, which is the show Bible. And this is from The Wire. And again, it's 80 pages long, and we're just going to take a quick look at a couple of things that I think are important. Because in this work, let's make this a little bit bigger too. By the way, this is a copy of what one of the creators' real. He has all his notes over my copy of his Bible. Anyway, he starts with an overview, and again, I want you to notice this part. The Sopranos becomes art when it stands as more than a mob story, but as a treatise on the American family. Oz is at its best when it rises beyond the framework of a prison story and finds commonalities between that environment and our own external world. So too should The Wire be judged not merely as a descendant of Homicide or NYPD Blue, but as a vehicle for making statements about the American city and even the American experiment. This is the writer pouring his heart out to his staff. This is what this show is about. This is what I want. This is more than it would be in his pitch Bible. This is in his 80-page show Bible. We're not going to look at a lot of the rest of this. He lays this out. He goes on and on and on about that part. He lays out the setting. And what's interesting is he talks about wanting to explore both the police who are in over their heads and don't really know what they're doing and not really sure how to do it, and the people on the street, the drug dealers, who are in over their heads and maybe don't really know what to do. In other words, he says right up front, we are going to show both sides. And when he lays out his characters, he does exactly that. He starts with those in the station house. He breaks them up a little bit like Stranger Things did. First, we have the police detectives in the station house, and I just want to point out one of them to you, number 8. Santangelo, white, homicide detective, 50 to 55, who, as the saying goes, couldn't track a bleeding elephant through fresh snow. What does that say about this character? And do you need to know any more than that? If you've got a case you want the police to follow, this is not the detective you want on your case. Okay. He then talks about the characters who are in the courthouse briefly, and then again, those characters in the street who are going to be very much a part of his series. And he describes them, and then he gets to the Bible. And for the next 70 some pages, he's talking about the Bible. So we'll leave him to that there. But those are some examples of what all of them shows that made it on the air and used their pitch Bible or their pitch deck or their show Bible to get farther in their series. Okay. Let's spend a bit more time with how you address the characters in your Bible. Two things to mention in particular. As we talked about earlier, don't make your characters perfect. Perfect characters are boring. Perfect characters are unbelievable. And that word, that Warner Brothers word, entanglements. Perfect characters are too hard to entangle. Imperfect characters are much more fun to entangle. By the way, the Warner Brothers document that I'm going to show to you, the pitch document, was given to me by the creator of White Collar, among other shows, Jeff Easton. And when he went in to pitch White Collar to Warner Brothers, the studio that made it, they said, here's how we want you to pitch. And we'll get into all that in a minute. But I fell in love with that word entanglements, because clearly that's what the studio wants. The more trouble, the better, almost, right? The more these characters are entangled with each other and can't get away, the better. So when you are laying out who works with whom, who lives with whom, you're laying out how they are entangled. And some of those flaws that you create are going to help those entanglements. Let's just take an example. Tom's older brother is successful, married to the world's best wife, has kids and a beautiful house, and is a drug addict. And Tom resents all of that and does not handle it well. Now, another entanglement, maybe? Tom is secretly in love with his brother's wife. Now, when his drug habit catches up to him and his world is about to come crashing down, Tom has the choice to let that happen or to drag his brother out one more time. These are entanglements, and they have the potential to carry through your series. And this is what Warner Brothers and other studios want to see in your pitch Bible, in the beginnings of in your pilot script itself. Those entanglements, because that's good drama. That's what they want to see. Remember that tension is drama. And one form of tension is when your characters want different things. So as you work on your Bible, ask yourself, what do your characters long for? What's in their way? What's stopping them from getting what their heart most desires? Tell us. In your Bible, you can tell us. You don't need to, especially if you tell us in your Bible, you don't need to be in a hurry to show us in your script, because we see little hints, maybe when we meet Tom, maybe the way he looks at his brother's wife, maybe, that stuff is going to play out over time in your series, but it can be addressed in your Bible. Okay, and to repeat what I said earlier, this is the part that we're talking about right now, these entanglements and how you know these characters and what their flaws are and how they get in their own way. This works whether we're writing a screenplay or whether we're writing television. This is the best part for screenwriters beyond people who have to present television Bibles to studios. Anyway, okay, give some thought, give a good deal of thought to the through line of the story your series is telling. Stranger Things straight up tells us this is 8 episodes and we're done, but then it describes that arc and then says, okay, we can go on. For you, what's that? What's the story? What's the larger story you want to tell? And that will help when you break down. You're mulling about that. You're thinking about that as you're driving or as you're showering, as you're walking. That's going to help because you're going to break that down into, this is in season 1, this is episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, and you're going to do that little chunky thing of this is season 1, this is season 2, this is season 3. In season 1, Tom sticks up for his brother, does not act on his attraction to his wife, plays the good brother, but resents the hell out of it. In season 2, where are you going with your series? Okay, all right. All right. So again, you're doing the same thing. You're working on all those parts that we talked about. What's the overall arc for season 2, for season 3, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, if you do all that, you've got the basics for your Bible. If it turns out to be a lot longer than 2 pages, you probably want to trim it down. If it turns out to be a lot shorter, you might consider, okay, what's missing here? What else could I say about my series, about my characters, about where the series is going that I haven't said yet? 10 pages seems to be about the magic number. Okay, so let's go back to why you create a Bible. Yes, it helps you write the script. Yes, it helps make your characters into living, breathing people. Yes, it's your roadmap to where your series is going, and that's all good stuff. But first and foremost, your Bible is a sales tool. That means it has to be tight, it has to sizzle, it has to read like an ad on TV. Don't repeat stuff. Don't comment on one character in the middle of telling us about another character. Don't make us wonder what you're talking about because you haven't mentioned that character yet in your Bible. All of these, by the way, are things that I've corrected my students of doing. Lay your Bible out, make sure it drives, make sure it has the soul of your, as we talked about earlier, of your, as Mr. Hawley did with Fargo, that slightly impish style is in the series and in his Bible. So what's your version of that? It has to read. It has to be a love letter to your series. But it has to read like, again, season 2 might go this way, might go that way. If you Pizzolatto, maybe you can get away with that. But for most of the rest of us, you don't want to be coy, and you don't want to seem unsure. You want to write in your Bible that you know exactly where your series is going. Because your pitch Bible is your sales tool. And again, the studios don't buy a pilot unless they see the series. I might have mentioned to you, I had a series of conversations at CBS, and the last one was a woman pretty high up in the organization who said, and this is years ago, love your female character, love how strong she is, interesting story, interesting setting, interesting characters, and the last line of her rejection was, I don't see the series because I had to actually sit down and say, damn, I didn't do what I told my students to do. I did rewrite that Bible and rewrote that pilot as well. And one of these days it may resurface, but that was the death knell. It wasn't going any farther because I hadn't shown her the series. Okay, let's take a look at that pitch document. we're a tiny bit behind. We started a little bit late, but I'm going to take just a couple extra minutes and just show it to you. He said, trying to remember not to talk and push buttons at the same time. Okay. So this is it. This is Warner Brothers pitch outline. And they say, start with a teaser, pitch a teaser that grabs your audience, that is visual, that gives us a sense of world tone. There we are, how to start with your world and tone and set up of your show. Then tell us more about the world. After you've grabbed us, tell us about the world. This is interesting and why you want to do a show about it. Probably the best example of this was one of my students, one quarter at UCLA, was writing a pilot about a principal dancer in a New York ballet dance company. She was a former principal dancer of a New York ballet company. She had the bona fides. She knew what she was talking about. That's what they mean. If you are an insurance investigator and you're writing about insurance investigators, tell them that. Okay. Characters, we all know this. Outline your character. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier. Outline your characters in order of importance. Whether you're pitching or in your pitch Bible, start with your most important character. You don't have to list all your characters. Notice that the True and Crime only talked about two, his two leads. One of them is married and has a family, and there were other characters and there were other people they deal with, and he's not even bothering to tell us any of that. So start with your important characters, but how they're related to each other, blah blah blah, all that stuff we talked about. When you come back to the pilot, here's the part again that suggests they're not looking at the pilot, they're looking at the series. Broad stroke the rest of the pilot. Don't go beat by beat or even act by act. There should be an overview. Key points that help establish character and setup, because that's what the series is about. More than the pilot, they're looking at the series. Okay. And a pilot needs to be an example of what a typical episode would look like, which means if you're writing a police procedural, the police should solve a crime in that first episode. If you're writing about doctors, if you're writing about law, you get the idea. Show us what a typical series, what a typical episode is going to look like in your pitch. Then go on to the series, and there's that word entanglements, and then tell us the tone. What is the tone? And Jeff was so adamant, he actually added this. He wanted me, and when he came and spoke to my students, he wanted my students to know that he would have done teaser, world and tone, characters, pilot, series. Same information, he would have put it in a different order. Again, if you're interested in this document, it'll be one of the ones that Jim will have. But that's it. That's your pitch Bible in a nutshell. Now, are there any questions?
Okay, Greg, I got 3 questions in the chat. Tracy, you're still here, right? Where are you? There you are. Okay, do you want me to read it, or do you want to just ask the question yourself?
I'm happy to read it. I wondered about a Bible app or any software that you use for building these.
There's absolutely a need for software when you're writing your script, but nah, this is mostly just usually a Word document. I will take that back. If you're creating a pitch deck and you're inserting, there is software, the most common of which I'm going to forget the name of, but there is software that will help you do that version. The rest of it is just a Word document. Yeah, when I think of it, I'll have Jim put that in the what stuff you guys can get to it. It's a specific name. I actually went and took a class on it and thought, this is over my head. But I'll remember what the software is called, and I'll tell Jim.
Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Second, Carol, you want to ask you still there? Why don't you ask your question?
Yes. I'm actually wrote a script for a feature movie, and I'm leaving the end of it kind of open. It's not really a cliffhanger, but it makes you wonder what happened next, because I'm thinking that the movie could have a sequel, and maybe that's what the industry's looking for. And so I'm wondering, is that good too, like for movies to leave it kind of open on the end?
Yes, but again, we have a couple of examples of exactly that in True Detective and in Fargo both, that they say this is done at the end of this season, we're done, but there's room for more if you want. In a screenplay, the way to do that is you're telling a story that has an end. You're cheating if you don't end the story, but that end leaves an opening to continue, then you're good. You're doing both. You're wrapping up the story you were telling, but you're leaving the door open for maybe there could be more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I've accomplished. I tried not to make it a cliffhanger,
Okay. All
but
right.
it answers some questions like, oh, did he survive? Yes, he probably did survive. That kind of looks like him at the end, you know?
All right.
Long hair now, he's a hippie, but you know.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, Jackie, I see your hand, but Val had a question before you, and she has a dinner engagement that she needs to go to.
talk
Thank
fast.
you, Jim. No, I want to hear. Hi, Jackie. It's good to see you, and I want to hear your question too. But no, thank you again, Greg. First of all, I wanted to say that, and also I wanted to make an invite to you to our MWSA conference in San Diego. I remembered today for some reason that you're out there in LA, and so if you'd like, I'm sure Jim can send you the link, and it's in September, and we'd love to have you since you're local.
Okay.
Anyhow, just an invite. We don't pay, unfortunately, but yeah, but we're great people. but my question was, who is this Bible shared with?
Studio execs. Your rep, your agent, or your manager would, again, your rep usually sends them a log line. Here's what Val wrote next. It's a love story on the biggest moon of Saturn. And they either say, send me that one sheet, or send me that Bible, or nah, we're not interested. So you're hopefully your rep, your manager or your agent is doing that work for you and finding the studio that says, yes, we're interested in that kind of story. And then you're sending the Bible and hopefully the script, and maybe you're in a meeting, probably on Zoom these days, and you're pitching it to studio execs.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious if it went to like costume designers or set people, others who
No,
they're not
because
going to waste the time reading your 10 pages.
well, no, we haven't greenlit this. Those
Yeah.
people get the script
Yeah.
once it's going to production. You don't need a costume designer until you're going to production. You don't need
Yeah.
set people and cameramen and grips and gaffers. You don't need any of that until you're going to production. So
Okay. All right, great. Thanks. That was my question.
okay.
Okay, Jackie.
Hi, thank you for all of this. Big fan of Charmed.
Ah,
I'm gonna ask I even watch them with the reruns. I'm gonna ask my questions backwards, but my big question is, I have a feature pilot. From that, I've written a feature screenplay. From that, I've written an hour pilot. From there, I have a sitcom, which I have worked out for 3 seasons. So
Okay.
my question is, the universe says this is the day Jackie's gonna get found, and somebody calls and says, we want to buy the whole thing. Is Netflix or whoever it buys it, are they going to buy it outright, or are they expecting the writer to go with the script, the program, to Hollywood or wherever, Albuquerque, wherever they're going to film it?
This is a good question, and it's why you need an agent and possibly also an entertainment
Just
lawyer.
my second question.
Yeah. You need,
Okay.
usually, not always, and this is changing too, but back in my day, I had an agent, I had a manager, and I hired a lawyer when I needed one, because the agent and the manager were working on commission, but the lawyer was by the hour. So I only paid the lawyer to say, can you look at my contract and am I being stupid? Yeah. So, and that's who, again, it was the first producer I worked with on my screenplay, trying to get one of my screenplays made. My entertainment lawyer said he has screwed this up. Do not tell him, because he's going to have to buy a lot more rights from you when this gets going. But don't tell him that he has messed up, because he didn't go to his lawyer. But you need help when it comes to that. How much rights are you giving away? Are you giving the rights to the feature and the TV show? Are you holding back some of these rights? Are you insisting that you be at least? Usually you get the most common option is you get to write the first version. And if they love your first version, they'll hire you to do a rewrite, because you're going to do 10 rewrites. But they may pat you on the head and say, thanks very much, we'll take it from here. And they might give it to somebody else. That happened to me. My first screenplay that was making the rounds. The first director who took it under his belt hired a pair of writers, paid them more than he paid me to do a rewrite that I absolutely hated. And I simply had to wait. When that didn't go through, the rights came back to me, and it was like, oh, thank God. Now I can do what I want. But you need help at that stage. You will need an agent, you will need a manager, you may need a lawyer. But I guarantee you that if Netflix, for example, had said, we want this, you won't have any trouble getting an agent or a manager. You say, excuse me, Netflix wants my script and I need an agent. When can you come over to, yeah, you won't have any trouble at that point. You just want to make sure you get a good one. So.
But how do you get it to Netflix, since you can't get it to them? It's such a catch-22. You can't submit it to, I've looked at the submission guidelines for most of the big groups, and you can't submit without an agent or a manager.
That's right. I'm going to speak in generalities. In general, it's easier to get a manager than an agent. And once you get a manager, the manager should help you get an agent. But there are lists of agents and managers out there you can have access to, and there are if you do a little research, and the Google is great for this kind of thing. Do they have a good reputation? Do they have a bad reputation? And which of them are accepting unsolicited material? That's the word, unsolicited material. In other words, they're not asking you to send it. You're saying, can I send you this? And that's where you start. You start with the agents or managers who are A, on the good list, and B, accepting unsolicited material. And some of them have windows. I will be accepting new potential clients from April through May. So you just have to know that. You have to do your research, and come April 1st, you have to be ready to send your stuff off. So
okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions before I shift topics and talk a little bit about the organization and the in our convention conference, whatever it's called, our meeting in San Diego? Any questions? All right, I'm going to end the recording then. Oh, wait, Carol, go ahead.
When is the meeting? Is it in August or September in San Diego?
Yeah.
Oops.
Jim's frozen for a second, but yes, it's in September, and he's going to tell you that in just a second.
Oh, okay.
Or Val is.
I guess I could Google it.